Micron reporting Q1 numbers moments ago. That stock moving higher right now in overtime of about 4.5%, enough to regain the losses from the session. CEO Sanjay Mehrotra saying he expects the business fundamentals to improve throughout 2024. Joining us now, CFRA Equity Research Analyst Angelo Zino. Got a buy rating, an $85 price target on Micron. Angelo, $85, not that far away. The guide, maybe not as conservative as some feared. What do you do with it from here?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we continue to have a positive view on it. I do think 2024 is the recovery year for Micron. Right now, it is all about kind of the margin trajectory here and their ability to get back to profitability. I think when you kind of look at the guidance here in terms on both the top line perspective at about $5.3 billion, I think the street was looking about $5.1 billion. But more importantly, on the gross margin side of things, at about 13%. That's, relative to where the street was at about 6.5%. It's showing you that the recovery is happening quicker than expected. Obviously, a lot of it has to do with an improved pricing landscape. So at the end of the day here, I think you continue to hold this or continue to buy the stock here, looking ahead into a recovery through the rest of 2024.
But to what point? Because there's Micron recovery, pricing, margins, inventory, and then there's end market demand. We've seen this demand slowdown in enterprise hitting some hardware names that one would figure would be building memory and those kinds of chips into their hardware. So at what point does that become a problem?
Yeah, listen, and our fear actually going into the February quarter numbers was some of the consumer side of things may not have been sustainable in terms of the recovery on the PC side of things as well as the smartphone side of things. And we kind of think about things. We do think that area is going to be a lot more resilient in 2024. I think Micron just commented on the fact that they expect low single-digit growth on both sides of things. And a big reason for that, obviously, is the easier comps. When you look at servers in 2023, I think that was the first decline in 7 years. On that side of things, we do expect a recovery there in 2024. And then, of course, high bandwidth memory is going to be the big story here for Micron in 2024. I think that absorbs a lot of kind of, some of that excess capacity out there. But when you think about Micron and the story here, a lot of it also is about the inventories there. They are making a lot of headway in terms of improving the inventories. I think about 170 days last quarter, down to about 159 days here. The goal is to get down to about 120 days. But when you kind of take back some of that strategic inventory that they're holding in terms of high bandwidth memory and what have you, they're closer to 142 days. So they're making a lot of strides there. Our view is kind of the pricing landscape will continue to improve through 2024 as that supply demand landscape improves.
How much of this is a Micron specific story? In the release, it says we expect calendar 2024 industry supply to be below demand for both DRAM and NAND. So I wonder how much of this inventory correction benefits not just Micron, but others across the semi landscape.
Well, listen, I think when you think about the broader semiconductor industry, 2024, again, will be a recovery year. We're looking at about 10 to 15% growth in terms of total semiconductor revenue growth. But among the different areas of semiconductors, the most pronounced recovery should come on the memory side of things. We're looking at north of 30, 35% growth, specifically on the DRAM side of things. In fact, when you look at Micron's guidance here, you're looking at north of 40% growth on a year-over-year basis in the February quarter, again, on some easy comps out there. So those memory players will, of course, see kind of a more pronounced recovery than other areas of the semiconductor industry. So I think another reason why you continue to play that theme into 2024. I think the risk here is one of the big players out there, clearly a Samsung or a SK Hynix out there, potentially increasing capacity quicker than expected, but we don't necessarily expect that at the very least until later into 2024 into 25.